I have found that in Christian doctrine, in every major area of Christian theology, difficult and interesting philosophical questions arise. So whether we're talking about, for example, the doctrine of God, or doctrine of creation, or doctrine of Christ, or doctrine of salvation, philosophical issues arise that cannot always be answered biblically. So, for example, the doctrine of God alone is just bristling with philosophical questions. The Bible says that God is eternal, but it doesn't tell us whether God is timeless or everlasting throughout all time. It tells us that God is all-powerful, but at the same time, it says there are things that God cannot do, such as sin or lie or fall down and worship a false god. So in order to unfold and understand the biblical concept of God, we need to reflect on these biblical data philosophically as best we can. Similarly, in even doctrine of salvation, for example, the Bible teaches that Christ died in our place to bear the punishment for sin that we deserved, thereby redeeming us from sin and giving us a divine pardon. And that raises all sorts of questions about the justice of such a procedure. Is it just to punish an innocent third party for somebody else's wrongdoing? Many people would say that's immoral, and therefore the doctrine of substitutionary atonement cannot be true. And in order to deal with this, you can't just quote Bible verses. You're going to explore interesting questions in the philosophy of law that will help to craft a biblical and defensible doctrine of the atonement. And on and on and on it goes. The Trinity would be another example of a doctrine that needs to be understood philosophically, or the doctrine of the deity of Christ, Christ having a complete human nature and a complete divine nature. How do you put those together? Well, that's a philosophical question once again. So over and over again, important Christian doctrines raise significant and interesting philosophical questions that we need to reflect upon. We can't just bury our heads in the sand and pretend that such questions don't exist.